Shabbat Shalom. This is Daniel John Lee with Torah Restoration Ministries, and this is my weekly Shabbat Shalom podcast. Today is episode 29, Dispensationalism and Replacement Theology. Again, this teaching can be found on my website at www.spiritandtorah.com. Along the upper left-hand corner, you'll see a link called Teachings, and you can find this teaching there. So there are two very huge deceptions that dominate our modern age with regards to Christianity, and they are dispensationalism and replacement theology. In case you don't know what these two terms mean, I will briefly define them here at the beginning. Number one, dispensationalism. Although there are many flavors of this doctrine, there are probably as many flavors of this doctrine as there are ice cream flavors. The basic premise is that Yahweh operated through the ages in different ways. So there is the age of conscience, the age of the law, the age of grace, etc. Depending on the age one lives in, it affects our relation to Yahweh and how we are to obey His commandments. So basically there are different standards of righteousness. For instance, a man living in the age of conscience would not be as beholden to the law as a man living in the age of the law. Likewise, a man living in the age of grace does not need to do the same things to attain righteousness as a man living in the age of the law would. So different standards of righteousness depending on the time period that you're living in. Number two, replacement theology. Rooted in hatred for Jews and anti-Semitism, this doctrine states that Yahweh is totally finished with the Jewish people, Israel, and demands for Jews to become filthy pagan Gentile pigs in a filthy pagan Gentile pig Christian church. I know that's strong language, but that's the truth. Essentially, Jews are done with. The covenant is over, and now they have to become basically like the Christians. Now, both of these doctrines feed the other. They support the other, and both are totally opposed to the renewed covenant, to the New Testament. Do we not read in both Malachi and in Hebrews that Yahweh, even Yahshua, does not change? In fact, in both books, we read the passage, He is the same yesterday, today, and forever. Well, if that's true, how could Yahweh change the way He operates with us if He does not change? After all, we know from Scripture that Yah is not a respecter of persons. Yet if a person from the age of law is compared to a person from the age of grace, they are judged by two different standards of righteousness. The former must keep the Torah, and the latter does not. Well, how absurd, how totally unscriptural. So depending on what year I live in, I may go to the lake of fire for different reasons than someone else? This doesn't make any sense. Why would y'all have two different standards? Exodus 12 declares very clearly that there is one Torah for the Israelite and the Gentile. Again, if we go to the New Covenant, the New Testament, in Ephesians 2, we read that there is no Jew and Gentile, but we are all one, grafted into the commonwealth of Israel. The Torah, or if we want to call it the Jewish Torah, is for everyone. Messiah himself was a Jew. Yahshua came from the tribe of Judah. Replacement theology is laughable, but helps to undergird the foolish doctrine of preterism. Preterism, of course, is the eschatology that believes that all prophecies in the book of Daniel and Revelation have been fulfilled, and we are already living in the new heavens and the new earth. Romans 11 plainly declares that it is Gentiles who must humble themselves and be grafted into the Jewish olive tree. The olive tree in Romans 11 represents Israel, and even more specifically, Yahshua. Thus, the olive tree on both counts is Jewish, or includes the Jews. Paul declares that the oracles of Yahweh were delivered to the Jews, and this is why Paul says in the book of Romans that there is great advantage in every way to being a Jew. Now, of course, the Jews who despise Yahshua and follow Talmud rather than the Torah are as pagan as the Christian Gentile pigs. I'm not referring to those. But the Jews who love Messiah and keep every jot and tittle of Torah is declared by Paul to have an advantage over converted Gentiles. It's the pagan Christian Gentile pigs who need to shut up and humble themselves, begging to be grafted into Israel and her Torah. So now with the foolishness of dispensationalism and replacement theology, these two ideas, which sprang from that heretic Marcion in the 2nd century, have birthed more strange children of deception than I can even count. Both of these theologies are very, very damaging, and they are totally anti-scriptural. And it's important to realize that although dispensationalism and replacement theology dominate much of modern Christianity, both of these doctrines are completely antithetical and opposed to the New Testament, to the Brit Hadashah, the renewed covenant. Because on the one hand, you have dispensationalism, which completely flies in the face of the scripture in Hebrews that says Yah does not change. He's the same yesterday and today and forever. On the other hand, you have replacement theology, which completely flies in the face of Romans chapter 11 and Ephesians chapter 2, especially Ephesians 2, which says very clearly, look, there is no Jew and Gentile. We're all one in Messiah. We're all grafted into Israel. We're all part of the commonwealth of Israel through the blood of Messiah, which was the exact case in the Tanakh, specifically Exodus chapter 12, where it says there is one law for the Jew and the stranger, for the Hebrew and the foreigner. One law. And we as humans want to complicate things and try to create these doctrines and theologies that complicate the very, very simple truth. The fact is, Yah has always dealt the same with mankind. From the first day of Adam till now, he has expected us to obey his instructions. Granted, in the time of Adam, those instructions were much more simple because we were much more pure. And over time, he's had to add instructions. But it's always been obeying his instructions. And if we obey his instructions out of a heart of love, then we will be able to walk with him in right relationship. And this has always been the case. And yes, he selected Abraham and he created a people, the Hebrews, that he chose. But he says all through the Tanakh that he wanted the Hebrews, the Israel, to be a light to the Gentiles, a light to the nations, because he wanted to bring in the other nations into Israel. And we see this happening. We see this with the Egyptians who went with the mixed multitude in Exodus 12. We see this with Rahab, the harlot, who is grafted into Israel after helping to hide the spies. We see this with Ruth, the Moabitess, who marries Boaz and is grafted into Israel and becomes an Israelite. We see this all through the Tanakh, where Gentiles and those who are born with Gentile blood become Israelites. And it's the same thing in Ephesians chapter 2. So the idea that there is any sort of replacement theology where Yah has just totally finished with Israel and the Jews and now he's replaced it with the Gentile church, that the Gentile church is somehow the new Israel, that's completely opposed to Scripture. And the idea that Yah somehow deals differently with people depending on what time period a person is living in is also completely antithetical to Scripture. Yah is the same. He does not change. He deals with us in the same manner and in the same way all through history, from the time of Adam until now. And furthermore, there are scriptures, particularly in Isaiah, where Yah says, as long as the sun and the moon are in the heavens, so will my promise endure, my covenant will endure with Israel. Well, replacement theology completely opposes that. In fact, there's so much scripture that opposes the doctrine of replacement theology and dispensationalism, it is a wonder that any Christian, any serious Bible believer who has even read a little portion of their Bible could believe those two doctrines, because they fall apart whenever you examine scriptures thoroughly, even if you don't examine them thoroughly. So I pray that this short podcast was enlightening and cleared up the deceptions that are contained in those two doctrines. Shabbat Shalom. Have a wonderful rest of your Sabbath as we enjoy the closing weeks of the beautiful summer, and have a great rest of your week. Shabbat Shalom.